Just a year ago, the house echoed with voices, the smell of breakfast, and the laughter of children. Now, only the whisper of loneliness remained, thin but persistent. He wasn't looking for a miracle, just heading to the laundromat, the one place where no one asked questions. But there, amid the scent of detergent and the hum of machines, he met her. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, pushing a cart bigger than herself, dressed too lightly for the cold, but with a smile bright enough to thaw a frozen soul for a moment. She came alone. No adult. No explanation. And from her first, "Thank you, sir," everything changed. His world hadn't fallen apart in a day, and certainly not with thunder. But with her, it began to rebuild. Not the same world, but a new one. Strange, fragile, and outside the lines. But maybe that's exactly what real looks like. Greetings, my dear viewer. Please tell me which city and country you're watching this video from. Maybe you're watching me from a small town or a gigantic metropolis. Write about it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. That Sunday didn't begin with sunlight or birdsong. It began with the now familiar sting of emptiness. Only a year ago, my mornings had been full of voices, breakfast clatter, and the soft chaos of family. These days, those memories felt borrowed, like a scene I'd watched in someone else's home. The laughter was gone, replaced by the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It isolates. Weekends were the worst, and that particular morning, the silence inside my apartment pressed in on me like a weight. I had to escape. Anywhere would be better than there. The laundromat had quietly become my retreat, a place where I could disappear into the background, let the mechanical hum blur out the rest of the world. Around 7, under a colorless, dull sky, I found just enough motivation to leave and walk the familiar route. My mood was as gray as the clouds above. Sunday after Sunday, the laundromat wore the same sleepy mask, flickering lights, the churn of dryers, and the slow, shared exhaustion of early risers. I'd only started coming there after the split. Before that, laundry had been her job, in the basement of the home we once shared. I moved out a year ago. 6 months after that, the papers were signed and final. The basement stayed behind, along with everything else I didn't get to keep. These days, I had a ritual. Get to the laundromat early, beat the rush, avoid the small talk. I wasn't built for early mornings, and laundry had never brought me joy, but I preferred knocking it out first thing. It helped me avoid standing in line or nodding at strangers who didn't really want to talk anyway. Sundays used to mean slow coffee and flipping through a paper, not battling laundry loads. I'd been a regular for about 9 months. Maybe I'd passed her before. If I had, I never noticed. But that morning I did. She was wrangling a cart nearly as tall as she was, one wheel shrieking with every turn. One hand gripped the heavy door, while the other tried to maneuver the cart inside. I looked up from the sports section, watching without really knowing why. Then I stood, walked over, and held the door for her. She looked up, flashed a radiant smile, genuine, bright, and so full of life it stopped me cold. "Thank you, sir," she said, then headed straight to the washers. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Maybe Latina, maybe mixed. Her wild curls bounced as she walked, and her pink jacket was clearly worn thin. I turned, half expecting to see a parent just behind her. No one followed. A twinge of unease settled in. She moved with the confidence of someone used to being alone, tossing clothes into the machine without sorting, without second thoughts. From a plastic bin in her cart, she pulled out detergent, added coins, hit start. Then, retrieving a small, worn-out teddy bear, she sat on the bench beside the machines and began murmuring to it as the washer rattled to life. From where I sat, I could see her outfit: simple jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, that same flimsy jacket. Not nearly enough for the icy morning air. Her clothes were clean but tired. There was something out of time about her, like a child from another century dropped into the present, surviving on instinct. The image didn't sit right. What kind of world sends a child that young to a laundromat alone? As a father, it made something twist inside me. I thought about my own kids. Right then, they were probably still tucked under blankets, warm in the house that used to be mine too. Their mother, my ex, would be making breakfast like she always did on Sundays. Pancakes or bacon, depending on the mood. Evan, 13, was a bacon kid. Harper, 15, was all about pancakes. Me? Waffles. Always waffles. But that version of life was growing smaller in the rear view. Since the divorce, she'd gotten full custody. I was allowed visits, but they were few and heavy with tension. My kids looked at me like a stranger. Why? Because I hadn't kept quiet when she told me what she planned to do. We were away on what was meant to be a romantic trip, a reset. Instead, she laid it out. She was going to sleep with someone else, a man with money and a reputation for wrecking marriages. She said it wouldn't be cheating because she was being honest. She promised it would be a one-time thing, swore she'd come back like nothing had happened. But she was clear. If I said no, she'd take everything. The house, the finances, the kids. I said no. And she kept her promise. She twisted the story, rewrote the script, told the kids I'd broken everything. They believed her. I didn't just lose a partner, I lost the core of my life. That morning, the memories sat heavy in my chest. I realized I hadn't eaten since the night before, a bratwurst and a malt at the bar during the Knicks game. By the door, a tired vending machine hummed beside a faded Coke dispenser. I'd always figured someone emptied it daily. Otherwise, it would have been picked clean. I dropped in some change and grabbed a Diet Coke and a pack of M&Ms. As I turned, I saw her watching. Not me, but the snacks in my hand. The expression on her face wasn't desperate or pleading. It was just quiet want. It hit harder than it should have. I walked toward her. "Would you like these?" I asked, voice soft. She straightened, hope flashing in her eyes before she quickly shook her head. "Mommy says no food from strangers, especially men." "That's a good rule," I said. "She's smart to teach you that." I set the snacks on the bench next to her. "I'll leave them here. You don't have to take them. I'm going to grab another set anyway." Back at the machine, I bought myself the same things and returned to my spot, hiding behind the paper. I pretended to read. After a few minutes, I saw her pick them up. Quietly, she began to eat. An hour and a half later, I folded my laundry, loaded my car, and left. I tried not to think too hard about her, but I couldn't help wondering if I'd see her again. The next Sunday, just after 7, I found myself hoping she'd show up, and she did. Roughly 30 minutes after I got there, she appeared once more, dragging that same noisy cart, her little figure buried beneath the same faded layers. I held the door again. She smiled just like before, said thanks, and went straight to her usual spot. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. She was just starting to load her laundry when I approached, taking slow steps before settling beside her on the bench. "Looks like that back wheel on your wagon's acting up," I said gently. "Mind if I give it a shot?" Without saying a word, she nodded while holding on to her stuffed bear like it was her anchor. I flipped the wagon and spotted the issue right away. The rear right wheel had twisted around the axle. I bent down and used my hands to straighten the wheel, then rolled the wagon back and forth. It moved smoothly again, no wobble. She glanced up at me, her expression one of quiet approval. "I'm Aaron Reynolds," I told her, stretching out my hand. She shook it solemnly, like it was some kind of official meeting. "Maya Ramirez," she said. "Pleasure meeting you, miss." "Well," I added with a smile, "now that we're introduced, we're not strangers anymore, huh? What do you say to a soda and some candy?" Her face lit up like a light bulb. "Can I get a real Coke this time?" "Deal. 1 classic Coke for you, 1 diet for me, and a bag of M&Ms to share." We ended up sitting there for nearly 2 hours, just chatting. I eventually walked to my car and grabbed a notebook and pen so I could teach her how to play tic-tac-toe. She caught on quickly, and I let her win a few games, just like I used to with my own kids. For a moment, I found myself lost in the memory of those times. But that led to another, darker one, when Tara, my ex, looked me square in the face and said she was spending the evening with Ryan Gallagher III, some hotshot attorney from the city. "It's just one night, Aaron. It doesn't mean anything. It's only physical," she'd told me. "You're kidding, right?" I yelled. "You think this is nothing? This is the end of everything." "Don't be so dramatic," she replied coldly. "Don't throw away nearly 2 decades over one night." I could have lied, snuck around, but I didn't. "Can't you just let me have this?" Then she took Ryan's hand and walked into his rented cottage like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stood frozen in place, the moment stretching on forever, though it probably wasn't even a full minute, before I gathered my things and walked out. "Your move, Aaron," Maya said, bringing me back to the present. I made my play, giving her the perfect setup. She nailed it with 3 O's in a row and grinned triumphantly. "Nice one," I said, raising my hand for a high five just out of her reach. She narrowed her eyes, climbed up on her chair, and slapped my hand with a laugh. "Gotcha," she said, her eyes shining. I stayed with her until her laundry was washed, dried, and folded. When I offered her a ride home, she politely declined. "Mom's rules," she said. "She sounds like a wise woman." "Maybe. She doesn't really go out much," Maya replied. As winter thawed into spring and then blossomed into summer, our meetups at the laundromat became a routine. I began bringing a little cooler with sandwiches and snacks for both of us. We'd still grab sodas from the vending machine. I didn't really need to eat that early, but I always took a bite so she'd eat too. She was so thin it worried me. Eventually, I began packing an extra sandwich and said it was for her mom. Maya would accept it quietly, offering a soft, "Thanks." By that point, she'd told me she was 7 years old and about to enter 2nd grade at the local school. Her dad wasn't in the picture at all. She hadn't even met him. Her mom worked part-time while Maya was in class, but she didn't know much else. Her mother was always home in the afternoons, and they mostly stayed inside unless the weather was good enough for the park. Maya kept up with every animated movie airing on TV, while I couldn't have named a single one. It was obvious money was tight for them. On some Saturday nights, her mom would go out on dates. Maya would have dinner, go to bed by 9, and the next morning, she'd get just enough money for 1 washer and 1 dryer cycle, then head to the laundromat on her own, dragging the little red wagon behind her. Honestly, I wasn't in much better shape. I was treading water, barely. Alimony, child support, and a mortgage chipped away at every paycheck from my job as a senior software developer. Not much was left afterward. I didn't really have a social life anymore. Sometimes I'd grab a beer with old friends, but dating, that was a chapter I'd closed. What I missed, what ached, was my kids, until I remembered how different things had become after the divorce. I tried to focus on the good memories, though they never lasted long before reality pulled me back. The morning after I walked out of the lake house, my phone blared. It was 10:06 a.m. Last I'd looked, it was 2:13, and I was pouring another bourbon. Must have passed out in one of the bedrooms. "Where the hell are you?" Tara yelled. "You left me stranded." "Call Ryan Gallagher III, I barked, and ended the call. Hanging up on a cell phone never delivered the same finality as slamming a landline. The next Sunday, Maya came in late, about 15 minutes behind schedule, and without her wagon. Her face was streaked with tears, and I felt my stomach twist. She clutched her teddy bear tightly. "Mom didn't come home last night," she said in a small voice, "and I don't have any money for the laundry." "Does that happen a lot?" I asked, my voice low and steady. She gave a gentle shake of her head, her wide brown eyes glistening with tears. "Mommy always comes back. That's her rule." I tried my best to comfort her, offering the sandwich I'd packed. The situation felt foreign, and I stumbled through it, unsure what the right thing even looked like. "Is there anyone else you could stay with until she returns?" I asked softly. She didn't answer, just shook her head again, her cheeks full of peanut butter and jelly. I knew I couldn't leave her alone. But if I called social services without thinking it through, she could end up in the system, and her mother might lose custody altogether. And it was clear. Things at home were already on shaky ground. "What if we head to your place first, leave a note for your mom, and then come to my house?" I offered. "She can call when she gets back and I'll bring you home." She hesitated, obviously torn. It went against one of her mom's rules technically, but being alone scared her more. After a pause, she gave a hesitant nod. I folded my laundry, neatly and quickly, then loaded it into the car. Her apartment wasn't far, and there wasn't much to take with us. Most of her clothes were either on her or in the laundry pile. I told her we'd stop for the essentials, a toothbrush, a brush for her hair. She gave me a tiny smile, sad, but sincere. On the kitchen table, I left a note with my name and phone number. Then we made a quick trip to Dollar General. Maya picked out a few basics: shirts, jeans, socks, and underwear. Her eyes lit up with quiet excitement. I smiled back, but a question tugged at the back of my mind. What if her mom never came back? We spent the evening curled up on the couch, watching Disney Channel. I made sandwiches for lunch and pasta for dinner, and when the clock crept toward 9, I tucked her into the sofa bed in my guest room. The next morning, I called in to work, deciding I needed a day to figure out what to do next. After lunch, we drove back to her apartment. Everything looked exactly as we had left it. I started opening drawers, hoping for a clue. In her mom's dresser, I found loose paperwork. Tucked in the mess was Maya's birth certificate, no father listed. Her mother's name was Faith Ramirez. There was a photo, too, Maya and her mom wrapped in a hug, likely from when Maya was a toddler. Faith's curly brown hair matched her daughter's. She looked like she was in her mid-20s, smiling, but her eyes carried a shadow, fatigue, or something deeper. I couldn't help but wonder if that sadness had grown heavier since the photo was taken. Maya watched me silently, not asking questions. I kept my voice casual, explaining I was just looking for something that might help us reach her mom. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Back at my apartment, I set the TV to Disney again and stepped into the bedroom to make a call. I dialed the police to report Faith Ramirez as missing. I didn't have much to offer, just a strong sense that something serious had happened for her to leave Maya behind. "Is the child still in the residence?" the officer asked. "No, she's with me," I said. "Right now, I'm the closest thing she has to a familiar face, and I'm more than willing to care for her until this is resolved." "We appreciate that," the officer replied. "Someone from Child Services will follow up." But I couldn't shake the dread that Maya would be placed into foster care. I'd heard enough stories to be wary. I knew I could give her a safe space, if they'd allow it. That's when I thought of Danielle, my boss's wife. She had connections in the social services world. I'd worked for my boss for 20 years, and over time, both he and Danielle had become like family. They had supported me through my divorce, and I trusted them. Within 20 minutes of my call, Danielle knocked at my door. "Thought I could use a new little buddy," she said warmly. I introduced her to Maya, and the two clicked almost instantly. It was beautiful to see. An hour later, Danielle hugged me tightly and assured me she'd do everything she could to keep Maya in my care. That evening, 2 officers came by to follow up. They didn't seem optimistic about Faith's return. I gave them the photo of Faith and Maya, the only one I'd found. By Tuesday, I was back at work. Thanks to Danielle's influence, Maya was enrolled in our company's daycare, which she had helped set up 15 years ago. I'd never needed it before. My ex-wife, Tara, had stayed home with our kids, but now it felt like a blessing. Every morning, I brought Maya in, shared lunch with her, and drove her home at the end of the day. The routine settled into something comforting. Having Maya around filled the quiet left behind by my grown children. They rarely visited anymore, and when they did, it was usually a quick dinner. I never brought Maya to those meals. I didn't want her to feel their distance. Instead, I'd ask our neighbor, Mrs. Owens, to keep her company. Maya brought brightness into my life. Because outings had been rare for her and her mom, everything we did became a new adventure. The first time we ate at a sit-down restaurant, not fast food, she looked around in awe. When I bought her a soft pretzel and a soda at the park afterward, she acted like I'd handed her the moon. Her joy lasted for days. She made me laugh, helped me smile more than I had in years. She even began teaching me little bits of Spanish. She was fluent in 2 languages, and my constant mix-ups always sent her into fits of laughter. I still remember one time at McDonald's when I accidentally ordered a horse and a Coke. She laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her cheeks. It never occurred to her that being bilingual wasn't the default for most people. To keep things simple, I let Maya stay in her same school for 2nd grade. I filled out the forms using my address and listed myself as her guardian. Nobody questioned it as long as I had her birth certificate in hand. There was never any official follow-up about her mother. No inquiries from child services about a foster plan. Maybe Danielle had connections in high places, or maybe we just vanished into the chaos of an overwhelmed system. Either way, Maya was now part of my household, and that meant my lifestyle had to grow up fast. Pizza and beer weren't going to cut it anymore. We started watching cooking shows together, and soon enough, we were both rolling up our sleeves in the kitchen. Funny thing, I'd never cooked like that with my own kids. In our family, Tara had always been the one to handle the meals. But now, with Maya by my side, I was learning, and to my surprise, enjoying the process. Cooking together became something we both looked forward to. Of course, it wasn't always smooth sailing. We had our share of spats, tension, and emotional outbursts, just like any other household. But that was what made it real. We were becoming a unit, a family. By the time a full year had passed, Maya and I had created a rhythm, a space that felt like home. That bond hit me full force one evening during the 3rd grade open house. We were walking through the school corridors when we bumped into one of her classmates and the girl's parents. After introductions were exchanged, Maya looked up at me and declared with unmistakable pride, "This is my dad." I had never thought of myself that way in our arrangement, but hearing her say it, it floored me in the best way possible. I cleared my throat, feigning some tickle just to hold it together, but Maya saw through it. She gave my hand a soft squeeze and met my eyes with a quiet, knowing smile. From that moment on, she stopped calling me Aaron, and I couldn't have been prouder. I was so wrapped up in this unexpected chapter of parenting that it didn't even dawn on me how long it had been since I'd been on a date. That changed one afternoon at the grocery store. We were rolling past the produce section when Maya's eyes locked on someone. A small woman was checking out the apples, and Maya nudged me. "She's really cute, Dad. You should totally ask her out," she whispered. I was too focused on our list to really notice, until Maya's suggestion made me pause and actually look. She wasn't wrong. The woman had a magnetic presence, caramel skin, an easy smile, eyes that sparkled with confidence. She looked up just as I turned her way, and we exchanged bashful, curious glances. "Well?" Maya said under her breath, her eyes flicking between us. I felt like disappearing, but instead, I took a leap. "Hi," I stammered, awkward as a kid. "I'm Aaron, and this is Maya, in case you heard. She, thinks I should ask you out." I stumbled over every word. "Would you maybe want to grab dinner sometime?" She gave me a warm, amused smile that set me instantly at ease. She looked to be mid-30s, no taller than 5'2", probably just over 100 pounds. Though her coat concealed most details, I could tell she was in great shape, and more importantly, her left hand was ring-free. Maya likely noticed that detail before I did. "Dinner sounds nice," she said, still smiling. "I'm Cherry Richardson." Maya couldn't resist teasing. "Smooth, Romeo," she said in Spanish, earning a laugh from Cherry. "So she's your little matchmaker?" Cherry grinned. "Grocery store setups, that's new." Flushing, I replied, "Totally not a setup, just serendipity." "Uh-huh. Sure," she said playfully. "Still, I'd love dinner." We exchanged numbers and made plans for Saturday. She mentioned she loved Italian food, so Maya and I decided to whip up a homemade spread. As we wrapped up our shopping, Maya and I shared a high five near the frozen foods. "Not a setup, huh?" Cherry called after us with a wink. The days crawled by until the weekend finally arrived. Saturday was all about prep. We cleaned every corner of the apartment, then dove into cooking, from scratch lasagna, buttery breadsticks, a crisp salad, and a traditional tortone cake. Cooking helped calm my nerves. I hadn't been on a real date in over 20 years. My last serious relationship had been with Tara. Beyond that, a blur. I vaguely remembered a girl named Madeline Riley. Word was she married the guy after me. Maybe they were still together, or maybe life hadn't gone as planned for them either. I took a breath. "It's just dinner," I told myself. But it wasn't just me feeling the butterflies. Maya was practically bouncing with anticipation. She stuck close, helping with every step. It dawned on me. Cherry would be our first adult guest who wasn't a neighbor or one of Maya's young friends. Dinner went surprisingly well. I was a nervous wreck at first, but Maya's presence added ease and levity that only a kid can provide. Midway through the meal, she casually turned to Cherry and asked, "My mom's single too. Were you ever married?" As soon as Cherry stepped through the door, I handed her a glass of Galliano. That was when Maya, out of nowhere, hit her with a question that made both of us pause. Her words took us by surprise, catching us off guard. Cherry looked at her with a gentle expression and replied with quiet sincerity, "I was married once, to a genuinely kind man, but that part of my life is behind me now." I caught a flicker of sadness in her eyes, quick but unmistakable. Maya, unfazed, continued chatting like nothing had happened. "My dad had a wife before too. I've got 2 half-siblings from that." It seemed like the perfect moment to fill Cherry in on my own background, my previous marriage, how the divorce went down, and how Maya ended up living with me. Cherry listened closely, her face open and empathetic. When I brought up Maya's mother no longer being in the picture, the energy shifted. Both Cherry and Maya grew silent. Then, as if sensing the heaviness, Maya pivoted the conversation with her usual light-hearted charm. "Your name's Cherry? That's awesome. I bet your parents were super fun, huh?" Cherry laughed warmly. "There's a funny story behind it. My real name is Madison. People used to call me Sella. Then one day, my little brother saw a box of Sella's chocolate-covered cherries and started calling me Cherry, and it just stuck." "I totally get it," I said. "Cherry fits you way better than Madison ever could." "Madison sounds like someone who wears giant glasses and orthopedic shoes," Maya joked. "Ouch!" Cherry laughed. "Okay, new rule. You're banned from ever calling me that again." She stayed until Maya's bedtime at 9. Before heading out, she casually mentioned that next time, dinner should be at her place. Just before she left, she leaned in and gave me a quick kiss. Not anything dramatic, but enough to leave me wondering if something more might be blooming. Or maybe I just hoped it was. "I think she'd be good for us," Maya said after I closed the door. I had a feeling she wasn't wrong. Over the following 5 Saturdays, we started a kind of tradition, our own mini-family nights. We all genuinely enjoyed them. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to spend some alone time with Cherry to really see what was there, just between the two of us. When I told Maya I was planning a solo dinner with Cherry, she took it surprisingly well. I explained she'd be staying with Mrs. Owens for the evening. Leaving her alone was never an option, not after everything we'd been through. She understood why that mattered so much. I'd never speak ill of her mother in front of her, but I also couldn't risk repeating that same mistake. For what Maya had dubbed our grown-up date, I reserved a table at a nice steakhouse. I had a feeling things would shift the moment I arrived at Cherry's place. She answered the door in a sleek, well-fitted dress, elegant with just enough edge. Her makeup was slightly more refined, and she was wearing a new perfume that hinted at warmth and spice, subtle but memorable. "Wow," I said with a grin. "I should have brought a shield. How else am I supposed to protect you from admirers tonight?" She laughed. "If that's your best line, you might actually be onto something." Dinner was excellent. Without Maya there, the conversation took a deeper turn, more intimate, more real. Even so, something felt off. Her absence was noticeable. "You're thinking about Maya, aren't you?" Cherry asked, her eyes meeting mine. "Yeah," I said. "We're together so much outside of school and work. I love it, honestly." She nodded, then added, "You must miss your older kids too." "I do. A lot," I admitted. "Things got messy after the divorce. Their mom turned them against me, and now they won't even hear my side. It hurts." "You seem like a really good dad," she said softly. "Can I ask why you never had kids?" "I don't mind," she replied. "We were planning to. But I made a terrible mistake. I cheated, not out of love, just recklessness. I ruined the person I cared about most. I've regretted it ever since. If I ever get another chance at that kind of love, I'm not letting it go to waste." Her voice dropped on the last words, almost too low to catch, but I heard every bit. Her eyes welled up and she blinked fast to keep the tears at bay. I handed her my napkin, and she dabbed at her eyes with care. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't mean to steer us into something so heavy." "I've never spoken about it before, not even with my family," she admitted. "I carry so much guilt." "All right," I said, trying to change the mood. "Let's hit reset. You ever tear it up on a dance floor?" "Dance floor?" she laughed. "What am I, in middle school?" "Honestly, I figured you for 35, I said, teasing. "And I'm 44, so technically you're just a kid." "Wait, 35? You're serious?" she asked, smiling. "Dead serious." "Well, I'm 43, was married for 12 years, divorced for 9, and hey, you're not bad for a guy's confidence either." "No way you're only 2 years younger," I said with a grin. "Next to you, I look like the older brother." I let out a quiet laugh, paid the check, and we headed to a dance club, an old haunt that Tara and I used to visit often. I've never been particularly graceful on the dance floor, hardly a Fred Astaire, but Tara was always in her element there. So when money wasn't tight anymore, I decided to take dance classes. I quickly learned that watching your wife waltz with other men while you warmed the bench wasn't exactly the secret to a great date night. Cherry, though, moved with such fluidity and elegance that watching her was as enjoyable as actually dancing alongside her. We stayed on the dance floor for a solid half hour, swaying to both upbeat tunes and slower numbers, before I had to tap out and take a breather. Cherry, seemingly tireless, looked like she could keep going for hours, but she followed me off the floor with no complaints. We found a high-top table, and I headed to the bar to grab us some drinks. I hadn't even made it halfway when a guy swooped in and took my spot. From a short distance, I watched her laugh softly at whatever he had said. Maybe he was genuinely funny, but she didn't budge from the table or agree to dance with him, which, I'll admit, gave me a quiet sense of satisfaction. I returned with her margarita just in time to see a younger man, probably mid-20s, approach us. He gave me a quick nod, then turned to Cherry and asked her to dance. I kept my tone even and calm, but the message was clear. "She's with me," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "And I've got little patience for disrespect, especially from kids." The guy seemed to register the warning. His expression shifted, and with a quick, "Didn't mean to step on any toes," he backed away. We finished our drinks and hit the dance floor again for another 30 minutes or so. One more guy approached us, but at least this one had the courtesy to ask. When I declined, he just grinned, shook my hand, and said, "No harm in trying. She's a knockout." Eventually, we returned to our table for one last round. Sure enough, another guy wandered over, clearly interested. I was about ready to wrap things up, and if Cherry had wanted to keep dancing, I would have gone along with it. But she turned him down herself, and I let him down gently. Later, I drove her home. It was still early, barely past 10:30, so she asked if I wanted to come inside for a bit. I said yes. We poured ourselves some wine and spent the next hour in easy conversation, the kind that just flows without effort. When I finally stood to leave, so did she. I must have paused too long because she let out a soft, melodic laugh that I was quickly growing addicted to. I felt my face warm. I was more caught up than I'd realized. "Take it easy, Aaron," she said softly. "We've got time." 2 weeks later, I broke a 2-year dry streak in the comfort of my own bed. Nothing wild, nothing reckless. Maya was asleep just down the hall, but the feeling of intimacy again was something I hadn't realized I missed that much. It wasn't some marathon, but Cherry didn't seem to mind. I made sure she felt taken care of first, and everything about it felt right, like my body remembered, like riding a bike. She hadn't planned to stay, but she did. She curled up against me, her breathing slow and steady, and I drifted off with her nestled in my arms. The next morning, she slipped on one of my white dress shirts, buttoning it just enough to leave something to the imagination. Even like that, she looked effortlessly stunning. We were walking into the kitchen when Maya came bounding in. The moment she spotted Cherry, her face lit up and she squealed with delight, throwing her arms around her. The hug was so full of warmth and joy it almost knocked Cherry over. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. It was ridiculously adorable. "Pancakes, pancakes," they chanted together. "Chocolate chip pancakes," I said, giving in. 6 months later, Cherry moved in, and the three of us formed our own little modern family. Despite the alimony and child support I still had to pay, my job kept us afloat, and Cherry had a stable position at an accounting firm. We weren't rolling in luxury, but we had everything we needed. Maya never wanted for much, and even if she had, she wouldn't have asked. She'd grown up with very little and had learned to appreciate the simple things. To her, we had plenty. Perspective matters. We weren't exactly the Brady Bunch, but you could have called us a 21st century remix of The Odd Couple, or better yet, The Odd Trio, black, white, and Hispanic, with different last names, to boot. That began to shift when I enrolled Maya in 4th grade that fall. On the registration form, I wrote her name as Maya Ramirez Reynolds. She was standing beside me when she saw it. Her whole face lit up like a sunrise, though she said nothing until we were outside. Then she burst with joy. "I get to be a Reynolds too? For real?" She beamed. "Not officially, not yet," I told her. "But by Reynolds rules, you're in." I even threw in air quotes around Reynolds rules, but she didn't care. She leapt into my arms and showered my cheeks with kisses. Then she leaned back, thoughtful. "When will Cherry be a Reynolds?" That hit me, harder than I expected. It wasn't something I'd thought through yet. But I started thinking about it after that. Exactly 1 year after our first night out, I asked Mrs. Owens to watch Maya for the evening. Cherry had told me she'd be working late and planned to grab a bite on her own, so I took the opportunity. I headed to the jeweler I used to frequent, back when I bought presents for Tara. Just after 6 o'clock, I stepped out of Julia Harris Jewelers, having worked with Julia's daughter, Jenna, to design a custom engagement ring. I placed a pizza order for Maya, Mrs. Owens, and myself, and made my way to our go-to pizza spot. As I was getting out of the car, I noticed a sleek, low-key restaurant a few doors down, and then my stomach dropped. Walking into that restaurant, hand in hand with a sharply dressed man in his 40s, was Cherry. She looked luminous, her joy radiating from every inch of her being. I sat motionless in the driver's seat, watching her from the car like I'd been turned to stone. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. It's hard to say how long I sat there, stunned, before I noticed the tightness in my chest. I dragged in a shaky breath, then a few more, trying to steady myself. Only then did I remember I still needed to grab dinner for Maya. Moving like a sleepwalker, I went inside, picked up the pizza, and headed home, my mind barely registering anything around me. The rest of the evening passed in a haze until Cherry came through the door around 8. She was in high spirits, practically crackling with excitement. "You will not believe who I ran into tonight," she said, practically glowing. "My brother Jackson just showed up out of the blue, didn't say a word about visiting." She continued, "Once my shift ended, we decided to grab dinner together. I figured since you and Maya were already doing the pizza thing, it'd be the perfect chance to catch up." Her voice faded when she saw my face. "So that's the story you're going with?" I asked, calm but firm. Cherry stopped cold, hearing something in my tone. "You saw me there, didn't you?" she said slowly. "You were at Salvatore's, and you assumed, seriously?" Her voice shot up, sharper now. That caught me off guard. I'd expected sorrow, maybe an apology, but not anger. This was no remorseful plea. This was fury. I'd never heard her raise her voice like that, but somehow it all fell into place. "You really don't trust me at all, do you?" she said, her voice trembling. "I told you about the affair in my last marriage. I owned that. I swore I'd never be that person again." She paused, breathing hard. "I know your ex-wife shattered your trust, but those wounds, they belong to her. And to you. Don't dump that on me. Do that again. Doubt me like this, and I'll be gone before you even realize it." I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Owens quietly slipping away as Cherry's voice rose and Maya ducked into the hallway. I wished I could disappear into the couch, but no such luck. "You're right," I said softly. "I let the damage Tara left behind spill over into this, and you don't deserve that. You're not her. You've never been her. And if I can't act like I know that, maybe I'm not the kind of man you need." I hadn't planned on proposing yet. Not tonight. But after how badly I'd messed things up, I couldn't keep it to myself. Cherry was still glaring at me, her eyes sharp and unrelenting. "I know this isn't exactly the perfect moment," I said, "but I need to prove what you mean to me. Give me your left hand." She hesitated, uncertain, then slowly held it out. I gently turned it over and wrapped a folded slip of paper around her ring finger, securing it with a rubber band I'd had in my pocket. She looked down, puzzled. "What's this?" She slid the paper free, opened it, and her eyes widened as she read. "You absolute jerk," she gasped, half laughing. "Are you serious?" Then she kissed me, longer, deeper than anything I'd ever felt, deeper even than anything I'd known with Tara. When she finally pulled away, she called out, "Maya, come here, sweetie. Look at this," she said, eyes shining as she held up the receipt. "I'm going to be a Reynolds, too." Their squeals filled the apartment, loud and giddy as they spun around the room together. I couldn't stop smiling. When things finally calmed, Cherry pulled out her phone, beaming. "Let's FaceTime your future uncle." Maya rushed off to find Mrs. Owens so Cherry could show off her surprise. The apartment buzzed with the kind of joy you usually only feel on Christmas morning. And then Jackson showed up. He was as handsome as Cherry was beautiful. Seeing them side by side, any lingering doubt vanished. He was clearly her brother, not some secret date. Cherry made the introductions, and instead of a handshake, he threw his arms around me in a bear hug. "Handshakes are for strangers. Family gets hugs," he said warmly. "Also, this is just a reminder of what happens if you ever hurt her." He gave me a firm squeeze to make the point stick. "Crystal clear," I managed to croak. Cherry caught him up on everything, our fight, the ring, the proposal. He gave me a look that was half amazed, half amused. "And you survived?" he said, grinning. She gave you that soul-crushing death stare, didn't she? Oh yeah, I said, nodding. Maya and Mrs. Owens exchanged looks. They'd both disappeared right before the storm hit. Then Jackson turned to Maya, gave her a warm once-over and said, "So you're the famous Maya Reynolds? I've been waiting on some nieces and nephews. You'll do just fine." Maya smiled, a little shyly at first, but then her eyes lit up. "Does that mean I get to call you Mom now?" she asked Cherry. Cherry didn't say a word. She just started crying. She pulled Maya close, holding her tight as they both cried in each other's arms, for different reasons, but with the same depth of feeling. Though Danielle had helped us start the legal process, the state had made us wait until Maya turned 16 to make it official. At that age, she could choose for herself. But Cherry and I had never worried. Our bond was already stronger than paperwork. The legal part was just a formality. And then, out of nowhere, just when I thought the storm had passed, I picked up a call without checking the screen. On the other end of the line was a voice I hadn't heard in over 6 years. It was Harper. "Dad, it's me. Harper," she said in a rush, not even giving me a chance to greet her. "Please, don't hang up." "Hey, slow down, sweetheart," I said, trying to calm her nerves. "I'd never hang up on you, or your brother." "Is something wrong?" I asked, anxiety tightening my chest. No, everything's actually really good," she replied, her tone suddenly lighter. "I'm getting married next month, and I want you to be there." Her words struck like a jolt. My daughter? Getting married? I hadn't even met the man she was marrying. The last time I saw either of my kids was years ago. Evan had just turned 16. We'd gone to his favorite diner, trying to recapture some sense of normal. I kept reaching out, asking questions, trying to connect, but the air between us had already chilled. After dessert, Evan finally looked up and spoke. "I'm 16 now," he said, voice steady. "The court visits don't apply anymore. Harper and I talked, and we've decided not to see you again. You left because of your pride, so keep it." He said it with more maturity than I expected, but he couldn't meet my eyes. Harper sat beside him in silence, caught in the middle, unsure of what to say. I remember exhaling slowly, recognizing that this moment had been inevitable. Tara's fingerprints were all over it. I was convinced they'd been fed a very selective version of the truth. I knew what commitment meant. I also knew that their mother didn't just walk away from our vows. She shattered them and made sure I felt every splinter. Then she rewrote the narrative to cast me as the villain. Maybe nothing I said would have made a difference. But for me, what she did wasn't some minor betrayal. It cut deep. Staying would have broken me slowly, from the inside out. I always held out hope that one day they'd understand. That they'd realize their mom had made her choices, then shifted the blame onto me. I couldn't carry guilt that wasn't mine. But if they truly wanted me gone... "Dad, are you still there?" Harper's voice yanked me back to the now. "You still want me to come?" I asked carefully. "Of course," I answered, my throat tightening. "I've actually been putting money aside for a moment like this." "You don't need to worry about expenses," she said quickly. "Ryan's taking care of everything." "Ryan?" I echoed. Something about the name twisted in my gut. "Wait, are we talking about Ryan Gallagher III?" Her reply was a mix of restrained annoyance and understanding. "Yeah, I guess you didn't hear. Mom married him. 6 years ago, right after we stopped seeing you. There it was, the man who helped tear my family apart, now their stepdad. The same man who played a part in wrecking my marriage, driving a wedge between me and my kids, and nearly wiping me out financially. And somehow, I was the one they called proud? If Evan ever wants to reach out..." "Dad," she interrupted gently but firmly, "this isn't about digging up old fights. You're not giving me away or sitting with the family. I'm not asking for anything dramatic. I just want you there." "Okay," I said after a pause. "But I have a condition." I'm bringing my family. She sounded startled. Your family? Yeah. Believe it or not, I've got one too. A wife who means the world to me. A daughter I think you'd actually get along with. Harper was clearly taken aback. I'd never told her or Evan about Cherry or Maya. I kept that chapter of my life sealed off, not wanting it to filter back to Tara. You have another daughter? She asked, her voice unsteady. Does she even know we exist? Maya's 16. We adopted her when she was 7. I found her living on the streets, pretty much. She's had a hard life, but we've helped each other heal. She knows about you and Evan, everything we once had, and everything we lost. She's smart, funny, resilient. Honestly, I think meeting her was destiny. There was a long pause before Harper responded softly. Then I look forward to meeting them. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday evening at an upscale venue, exactly what you'd expect for the daughter of a high-powered attorney. I had to admit, Ryan didn't spare any expense. The ceremony itself was held in a grand old cathedral downtown. Cherry, Maya, and I slipped in just before it began, finding seats quietly in the last pew. We'd planned it that way, avoiding mingling and sidestepping curious stares from faces of the past. As Harper and her new husband, Miles, walked down the aisle after the vows, she spotted me and blew a kiss in my direction. At the reception, we arrived late again, claiming a table tucked into a quiet corner of the ballroom. It might have seemed unfair to Cherry and Maya. They'd both spent the previous day getting pampered, picking out the perfect outfits. Cherry looked radiant, every bit the woman who'd saved my life in more ways than one. Maya, trying out a full face of makeup for the first time, looked more like a college student than a teenager. It made my heart ache with pride and a bit of panic, but neither of them complained, even when we were seated far from the action. We sipped wine, Maya with her Coke, and just took in the night. As I suspected, once people realized I was there, a few familiar faces drifted over, old friends, long-lost relatives. But what truly caught me off guard was seeing Rachel and Philip, Tara's parents. Rachel's eyes filled as she hugged me, and Philip, who'd barely tolerated me when I was married to their daughter, shook my hand with a warmth I'd never felt from him before. I brought Cherry and Maya along to meet Rachel and Philip, fully anticipating some awkwardness. 18 years of shared history as former in-laws tends to leave a mark. Since I'd had no part in organizing the wedding, I figured it best to keep a low profile. We stuck mostly to ourselves, watching as others filtered by with polite greetings. Still, I couldn't miss the glances, the double takes from those who recognized me and were visibly thrown off by my companions. A radiant black woman and a magnetic young Latina. The reaction from some of the wives was particularly telling. Their polite smiles barely masked the disapproval, as though they thought I'd shown up with a couple of trophies to prove something. Right on cue, Tara and Ryan approached. Having spent nearly 20 years married to Tara, I could read every flicker of emotion in her posture. The instant she laid eyes on Cherry, her smile tightened and her whole demeanor shifted. She wasn't thrilled. Was it Cherry's race? Maybe. Her looks? Almost definitely. But more than that, I suspected it was the way Cherry's energy, grace, and confidence threw Tara's own self-doubts into sharp relief. In Tara's mind, someone like Cherry didn't fit beside someone like me, not in the world we used to share. Tara was so caught up staring at Cherry, she seemed to forget this was the first time we'd seen each other in nearly a decade. When I leaned in and gave her a quick cheek kiss, she looked momentarily flustered. "Oh, Aaron, sorry," she said quickly, regaining her composure. "I'm still adjusting to these heels." "Not a problem. You look great," I replied, my tone smooth but the compliment soft-pedaled. I introduced everyone around, Cherry, Maya, Tara, and Ryan, giving Ryan a handshake loaded with warmth and a nod to his influence on where I'd ended up. Everyone but Maya stiffened at that remark. Maya just shot me a sly smile and gave my arm a squeeze. That kid doesn't miss a thing. We kept it light, pleasantries and polite chatter, until Tara and Ryan excused themselves. Perfect timing, too. The bride and groom were making their entrance. Maya gave me a subtle headshake that told me she'd found the interaction just as hollow as I had. To my surprise, my daughter, the bride, approached me with more affection than I ever would have expected. She wrapped her arms around me, holding tight, tears streaming. Cherry and Maya stood close, watching, while her new husband hovered nearby. I was speechless. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, voice trembling. "For all of it. I didn't really understand, not until today. When I said my vows, it all finally clicked." She pulled back slightly, her eyes brimming. "Now I see what it must have been like for you, when Mom broke hers. I used to think you were being stubborn like Evan always said. But you weren't. You were holding on to something that mattered. She was the one who let go, and then blamed you for it. We both did. How do I even start to make that right?" A knot tightened in my throat, sharp and sudden. I hadn't shed a tear since a football injury in high school, but in that moment, I was close. "Well," I said, clearing my throat, "a good start would be introducing me to this guy and saving me a dance." She blinked, flustered. "Oh, right. You haven't met him yet." She turned to her groom with a glow. "Miles Walker, meet my other dad, my real dad. Dad, this is Miles." Miles and I shook hands firmly, something unspoken passing between us, mutual respect, maybe even recognition. I gave him the classic father's warning, the treat her right bit, and then brought him and Harper over to meet Cherry and Maya. As they chatted, the band started to play. "Daddy?" Harper asked, glancing toward the dance floor. I offered my arm. "Lead the way." As we stepped into the spotlight, the room seemed to lean in. Harper's emotional greeting had already drawn attention, and now all eyes were on us. I knew I was stealing some thunder from Tara and Ryan, but for once, I didn't feel the need to apologize. I had time to reclaim. The music wasn't my usual taste, newer pop tracks, but after all those years dancing to similar tunes with my ex, I'd learned how to move. Harper looked impressed. We danced 2 songs, the crowd growing with each beat. Then she threw her arms around me in a tight hug. Applause followed. Cherry and Maya waited just off the floor, beaming. I reached out and brought them into the fold. Together, the 3 of us danced with the rest of the crowd, letting ourselves just exist in the joy of the moment. "Look at you go, Mr. Rhythm," Cherry teased, leaning into me. "Turns out giving your daughter away is more fun than I thought," I said with a laugh. Then I turned to Maya. "But let's not rush a sequel, okay? My heart's not ready." "Spin me, old man," Maya shot back with a grin. We stayed on the floor for 6 more songs before I slipped back to our table for a breather and a glass of Jack. Watching Cherry and Maya laugh and dance, I felt their joy settle into me. I didn't notice Tara until I felt her hand on my shoulder, a touch I knew well. "This should have been our night," she said softly, just above a whisper. "Not mine and Ryan's. You walked away from 18 years. And for what? You must not have loved me enough." I kept my eyes on the floor, face unreadable, not giving her the satisfaction of a response. "You couldn't be bothered to stop yourself, not even after I spelled it out for you, warning exactly how this would end. It wasn't love, and it certainly wasn't respect. But hey, in the end, you landed Ryan. What a catch, right? And me? I found Cherry and Maya. Like the Stone said, can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. You were selfish back then, and maybe you still are. That might be true for me too, but at least I've found peace in it. And I've slept just fine ever since you made your choice. I never expected you to be sorry anyway. Life's been steady." A few years back, Evan reappeared, just when things were getting serious with someone. Funny how commitment sharpens perspective when it's your own. He called out of the blue, said he had something to say. I told him to come by. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a bottle of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. "Harper said this was your favorite. Thought it might help smooth things over," he said as I stepped aside. We hadn't really talked since Harper's wedding, over 2 years ago now, and even then, it had been cold. Things between Harper and me had healed since, but Evan and I had never really closed the gap. "I proposed to Sydney," he told me, "and it made me think about you and Mom. Harper's been saying all along that you were the one who got hurt, not her." It wasn't until Sydney and I had the hard talk, the one about faithfulness and trust, that he finally saw it. "I owe you an apology, Dad. I was wrong, totally off base. I just didn't want it to feel like I was betraying Mom." "I never asked you or Harper to pick sides," I said. "I only wanted you to understand why I walked away. I didn't have another option." We ended up sitting there for hours, talking through the haze of that bottle. Cherry whipped up a fantastic dinner, and the 4 of us caught up like old friends. Evan crashed on the couch. Cherry made sure of that after we'd drained the bottle. At the wedding, Cherry, Maya, and I sat with the groom's side. Harper and Miles were there too, along with their little boy, Blake, our grandson, who was perched next to Tara. It was important she still felt included, especially now that she was on her own. Ryan had traded her in for someone younger a year ago. The kids kept me loosely in the loop about Tara, just the occasional update, but I told them not to play messenger. We're grown. If she wanted to reach out, she knew how. Maya flew in for the occasion. She's in her first year at Michigan State now, but she wouldn't miss Evan's big day. I made sure she got there. She, Evan, and Harper have grown incredibly close, tight, like siblings should be. They joke she's the favorite, and honestly, sometimes I think they're right. Watching them, it's impossible not to notice how much of who we are is forged in both blood and experience. There's something solid between Maya and me, something untouchable. Even Cherry sees it. We've weathered storms that would tear most people apart, and instead, it stitched us closer. In a similar way, Cherry and I share that depth. We've both been hurt before, and that makes us treasure what we have even more. As empty nesters, we make the most of every quiet moment. Cherry caught on quickly that an empty home meant more freedom, and she's embraced it with some fire. Her pleasure still takes me by surprise, still stirs something primal in me. Some mornings we wake up sore and grinning, feeling the ache of a night spent well. Once the formalities at the wedding were done, Cherry and I hit the dance floor. Maya joined in too, spinning around with one of Evan's groomsmen, after Evan gave him a pointed look and warned not to mess with Dad's favorite, which made me laugh. After about 6 songs, I turned toward our table, but Maya grabbed my arm, pulling me back for one last spin. That's when I noticed. Cherry and Tara hadn't exchanged a word. Not even a glance, despite being just a few feet apart. "Feel that chill?" Maya whispered, ever the perceptive one. When I got back to the table, Cherry slipped away to dance with Maya. Then came a tap on my shoulder. I sighed inwardly. Round 2. "So," Tara said, leaning in, "not even a little jab? No satisfaction over Ryan leaving me?" I looked at her and shrugged. "Not my story, not my drama." "I know you probably won't believe this," I said, "but I don't think about you much anymore. I don't wish you harm, but I don't spend time worrying about your life either. We had our years, 18 of them, and that chapter's closed. I've moved on. My life is full. I don't sit around wondering, what if?" My eyes drifted back to the dance floor, but then I glanced at her, and there it was. That flicker. Fear. The kind that creeps in when you realize you might end up alone. Back then, she never thought that far ahead. Probably assumed I'd break when she made her threats during the divorce. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered, if the tables were turned, she wouldn't have hesitated to crush me. "I was down when you left," I said as I stood. "And sure, maybe there are pieces of me that still are, but I'm not staying there. Then I turned away, walking toward Cherry and Maya, where I truly belonged. That's the final word of our first tale. But don't go yet. Another unforgettable story lies ahead. Let's jump in. Can still recall the exact instant I realized my marriage was truly beyond saving. It wasn't the day Lisa told me she was pregnant. That was the moment I foolishly clung to the hope that we might still find a way forward. No. The final, irreversible fracture came 3 weeks later, as I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to her laughter bounce off the walls as she told her lover there never was a child. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Mark Daniels. Just 6 months ago, I thought I had it all. A thriving career in investment banking, a beautiful home, and what had once been a loving marriage, now reduced to dust. The job's still mine. The house, too. But the marriage? That's been dead for a while. This is the first time I'm telling the full story of how it really ended. Things began to unravel shortly after we celebrated our 5th anniversary. At first, the signs were subtle. Lisa's smiles became fleeting, vanishing the moment she thought I wasn't looking. She began working later, coming home well past dinner. Our meals became wordless, filled only with the scrape of cutlery. I threw everything I had at saving us. We tried candlelit dinners, counseling sessions, even booked another trip to the Maldives, the place where we'd first fallen in love. But none of it brought her back. By the 6th year, we'd become nothing more than cohabitants. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom. We barely spoke, communicating through terse texts and sticky notes on the fridge. The woman I had promised forever to had become someone I barely recognized. And in trying to hold on to her, I'd become someone foreign to myself, angry, suspicious, and exhausted from trying to revive something that had already flatlined. After a 1.5 years of this slow disintegration, I made the call. I reached out to James Merrick, an old college buddy who'd since become one of the top divorce attorneys in Boston. We arranged to meet for lunch at a quiet Italian spot, far enough from work to avoid anyone I might know. James slid a manila folder across the table. "Everything will be ready in a few weeks," he said. "From what you've told me, it should be a straightforward case. Massachusetts law splits assets fairly, and since there are no kids, that simplifies things." I stared down at the folder like it might explode. 6 years of our lives, now reduced to legal language and a list of belongings. "What if she challenges it?" I asked. James took a sip of water before replying. "She can try, but your prenup holds up. Unless she claims something extreme, hiding assets, misconduct, you're in the clear." I nodded, but the question still weighed on me. "When should I bring it up?" I finally said. "This weekend," I added. "She's flying home from her sister's in Chicago. I think it's best we talk in person." James gave a short nod. "That's wise. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and avoid pointing fingers. Keep it unemotional, and it'll be easier on both of you." I left the restaurant with the folder tucked inside my briefcase, feeling like I was carrying something that could blow our lives apart. That night, I sat down and wrote out exactly what I planned to say, going over it again and again until the words felt hollow. I wasn't trying to be cruel, only honest, kind, but firm. We had reached the end, and it was time to let go. Her flight was due to land at 2:15 on Saturday. I spent the morning obsessively cleaning the house, my usual routine whenever I was dreading something big. By midday, everything gleamed, and there was nothing left to distract me. I sat in the living room, the divorce papers laid neatly on the coffee table, and waited. At 3:30, the door finally opened. My pulse spiked. I sat up straight, silently rehearsing my lines one last time. She walked in, wheeling her weekend bag behind her. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and the dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. For a fleeting second, I felt a twinge of something, a memory of homecomings filled with tight hugs and relief. But that version of us no longer existed. "You're here," she said. her voice flat. Yeah. I gestured to the chair across from me. We need to talk. It's important. Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe fear. She set her bag down and lowered herself into the chair cautiously, like she might run if things got too intense. What is it? She asked, her eyes landing on the stack of papers. I drew in a breath. Lisa, I began. We both know things haven't been right for a long time. We've tried everything, but nothing's changed. I've done a lot of thinking, and I really believe I'm pregnant. Her words hit like a thunderclap. I stared at her, sure I'd misheard. Can you say that again? I asked. Her gaze lifted to meet mine, tears shimmering in her eyes. I'm pregnant, Mark. That's why I went to Chicago. I had to talk to Jen first, figure out how to tell you. I know it's been hard between us, but maybe this changes things, doesn't it? It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. A baby. After years of carefully scheduled discussions about the right time, after months of distance and silence, now she was telling me we were having a child. How long have you known? I asked quietly. 3 weeks, she whispered, brushing away a tear. At first I didn't believe it myself. With how things have been, it's not like we were even trying. I took 3 separate tests, and each one confirmed the same result. Wanting absolute certainty, I booked an appointment with a physician in Chicago. Back home, the divorce papers remained untouched on the kitchen table, arranged meticulously beside the key points I had gone over countless times in my mind. But suddenly, the script I'd prepared felt meaningless. Say something, Lisa murmured, her voice trembling slightly. What could I possibly offer in that moment? That I had nearly ended our marriage? That I'd already made peace with walking away from everything we once shared? That the timing of her news seemed almost suspicious in its perfection? Instead, I spoke the only truth I could muster. I didn't see this coming. Her expression dimmed a little. Neither did I, she said softly. Then she added, maybe this is what we needed. A fresh start. Maybe it's the thing that can pull us back together. I studied her face, searching for any trace of deceit. In the beginning, Lisa had worn her emotions openly, every thought flickering across her features. But the woman sitting across from me now felt like a stranger. I need time to make sense of all this, I said at last. She gave a small nod, and a hopeful smile tugged at her lips. Take all the time you need. I'm going to unpack and rest for a bit. That flight really wiped me out. And, well, early pregnancy can be exhausting. She got up, paused for a second, then bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, the first sign of tenderness between us in what felt like ages. When she left the room, I remained rooted in place, staring at the divorce documents as though they belonged to a life that had already ended. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake in the guest bedroom, my thoughts spiraling. If what Lisa said was true, everything had changed. A child would tie us together, regardless of whether our relationship endured. But if it wasn't true, why would she fabricate something so easily disproven? What could she possibly gain? Those questions echoed endlessly in my head until the sun came up. In the days that followed, I noticed a shift in her. The cold, distant presence I'd grown accustomed to was gone. In its place was someone affectionate, engaged, seemingly determined to mend what had unraveled. She started preparing breakfast for both of us, asked about my day with genuine interest, and even suggested we return to church, something we hadn't done since our early years together. And then there were the physical signs, the sudden bouts of morning sickness, a growing aversion to once-favorite foods, the constant fatigue that had her napping mid-afternoon and turning in early at night. It's totally normal, she told me after a particularly rough morning. It should ease up once I'm through the first trimester. I nodded, playing the part expected of me, the supportive father-to-be. But doubt quietly simmered beneath the surface. Something about all of it felt off. The perfect timing, her radical change in demeanor, the strangely synchronized symptoms that only ever seemed to appear when I was around. It didn't sit right. James called a few times, asking why the divorce hadn't moved forward. I gave him non-committal answers, said I was still thinking things through. I couldn't bring myself to explain the turn things had taken. How could I tell him that the woman I'd prepared to leave might now be carrying my child? Or that, deep down, a sliver of me wondered if this twist of fate could fix what was broken. 3 weeks after breaking the news, Lisa handed me a small sheet of paper. "Here," she said, her eyes glowing, "the baby's first photo." I looked down at the blurry ultrasound image, a swirl of emotions rising: disbelief, cautious hope, fear. An arrow pointed to a tiny shape, the beginnings of a life neither of us had planned for. "The doctor said everything looks great," she added, watching my face closely. "I'm about 9 weeks along. They gave me a due date, February 15th. I ran my finger gently over the image. "Did you hear the heartbeat?" I asked. There was a flicker across her face, a subtle shift I couldn't quite interpret. Was it uncertainty? Reluctance? "Not yet," she said. "They said it's a little early to pick it up with the Doppler. Maybe next visit." I nodded, tucking the image into my wallet. That night, I found myself scouring medical websites, researching what to expect in early pregnancy. According to what I read, a heartbeat can often be detected via transvaginal ultrasound as early as 6 weeks, and usually by Doppler somewhere between 10 and 12. If she was 9 weeks along, why hadn't they at least tried? The next morning, I called James again. This time, I asked if he knew any reliable private investigators. He sounded surprised, but didn't pry. He gave me the contact info for someone he trusted, discreet, experienced. I met Catherine Mills at a cafe near my office the next day. She was older than I'd imagined, with perceptive eyes and streaks of silver in her thick, dark hair. I kept my story short, stripped of any emotional undertones, just the facts. A failing marriage, divorce in motion, a sudden pregnancy that didn't quite add up. When I finished, she looked me straight in the eye. "What exactly are you hoping to find out, Mr. Daniels?" "I need to know if my wife is actually pregnant," I said. Saying the words aloud felt surreal. "And if she isn't? I need to understand why she'd go to such lengths to pretend." She gave a slow nod and scribbled something in her notebook. "I'll need access to your home, preferably when she's not there." Gaining access to her phone logs would be a game changer. Just as valuable would be identifying anyone close enough to her to potentially be in on this. We spent the next half hour ironing out specifics, arrangements, compensation, the timeline. As I rose to leave, she hit me with a stare so sharp it sliced right through my practiced calm. "Mr. Daniels," she said in a measured tone, "what's your course of action if your suspicions turn out to be right? And if they don't?" Her words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. It was the one question I'd been dodging for weeks. "If I've misread everything," I said after a beat, "then I'll do my best to be the father this child deserves, no matter what becomes of Lisa and me." I let out a breath. "But if I'm right, then I need undeniable evidence. I can't let her twist this, manipulate it, or take even more from me than she already has." She gave a small nod, apparently satisfied. "You'll hear from me within a week." 3 days passed. I arrived home earlier than usual, a migraine throbbing behind my eyes from a day of relentless stress. Seeing Lisa's car already in the driveway threw me. Wednesdays were her regular yoga evenings, followed by catching up with friends. I slipped inside as quietly as possible, assuming she might be napping. Laughter floated in from the kitchen, light, carefree, unrestrained. It was a sound I hadn't heard from her in what felt like ages. For a moment, it brought a smile to my face, and the pressure in my skull ebbed. I walked slowly down the hallway, stopping just short of the kitchen doorway. "He's buying it hook, line, and sinker," Lisa said, her voice smug and tinged with glee. 9 months of acting for a lifetime of payouts. My gut clenched. A man answered, but his words were too low to catch. Lisa laughed again. "Nope, not even a hint of suspicion. You should see him. He's playing the devoted dad like it's an Oscar performance." There was a pause, then more murmured words from the man. "Of course the ultrasound worked," she said breezily. "I told you. My friend at the clinic owed me a favor. She just grabbed one from their records and swapped in my name." He never had a clue. I stood frozen, the floor seemingly vanishing beneath me. It wasn't just that my fears were realized. They were being paraded, mocked, twisted into some cruel inside joke. She hadn't only lied, she was reveling in the manipulation with her lover, basking in their deception. Every part of me wanted to storm in and demand the truth, but something instinctual urged restraint. If I confronted her now, she'd cover her tracks, dig in, erase the trail. I needed more than just a fragment of truth. I needed the whole firestorm. Without making a sound, I stepped back and slipped out the door. Back in the car, hands shaking, I stared blankly at the wheel. I was torn between cold fury and a surreal calm. The woman I had once loved, trusted, promised my life to, had orchestrated a lie so precise it ensnared me in a fantasy of fatherhood, all for financial leverage. I dialed Catherine Mills. "I need to meet. It's urgent," I said when she answered. "You were right. And now I need more than just surface-level intel. We're digging deep." The next morning, I handed Lisa a cup of ginger tea, claimed to help with nausea, and kissed her on the cheek. "You're in an unusually good mood," she said, eyeing me curiously as she accepted the cup. "I've had a lot to think about," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "About us, about the baby. I didn't handle it well at first, and I'm sorry. I just needed space to wrap my head around it." She blinked in surprise. "That's understandable. It caught me off guard, too." I reached across the table, threading my fingers through hers. "But now that I've had time, I'm feeling hopeful." Her expression softened, clearly not what she was expecting. "This could be a new beginning for us," I continued. "A clean slate. Maybe even the future we always talked about." "Seriously?" she asked, eyebrows lifted in disbelief. "Absolutely," I said, squeezing her hand. "In fact, I was thinking we should celebrate. Just us. That resort in the Berkshires you love, we could spend a weekend there. Maybe even start buying a few things for the baby's room while we're out." Her face lit up, delighted. "That sounds incredible. But are you sure we should be spending that kind of money right now? With the baby?" I waved the concern away. "We're fine. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Our child deserves a special beginning." The trip was only the start. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into the role of the ecstatic expectant father. I dove into parenting books, compared stroller models like I was choosing a sports car, and even opened a college fund in the baby's name, making sure Lisa caught sight of the confirmation. She kept watching me, sometimes with a wary flicker in her gaze. On more than one occasion, I caught her looking at me like she was trying to read beneath the surface, searching for signs that I knew. "You're really going all in on this dad thing," she remarked one night as I tightened the final bolts on a crib I insisted we assemble early. "There's no other way to do it," I replied with a wide grin. "You only get one shot at something this big." Above all else, I was obsessed with making sure everything appeared immaculate for the tiny life we were supposedly preparing to welcome. When I casually dropped the word miracle, she flinched, so subtly most would miss it, but I didn't. Perfect. Let her sit in the discomfort of her lie. On the surface, I wore the mask of the overjoyed father-to-be, but behind the scenes, I was orchestrating something far more calculated, coordinating closely with Catherine Mills and James Merrick to ensure that when the curtain finally dropped, Lisa wouldn't have a single way out. Catherine had covertly installed a network of miniature recording devices around the house and built me a custom app to quietly archive Lisa's texts and calls. James, meanwhile, was hard at work developing an intricate legal framework tailored to the trap I was setting. It had been a month since I overheard Lisa slip up in the kitchen, just enough time to prepare my next move. Over a romantic dinner at her favorite spot, I made my play. "Lately I've been thinking a lot about our future," I began, my tone calm and deliberate. "With the baby on the way, maybe it's time to take a fresh look at our financial setup." She took a sip from her wine, her gaze unreadable. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" she asked. "Nothing huge," I said smoothly. "Just a few things to make sure you and the baby are fully protected. My advisor mentioned creating a trust and shifting some assets. It's just smart planning." I reached across the table, gently wrapping her hand in mine. "I just want to be sure that if anything happens to me, you're both taken care of." Her eyes lit up with a flicker of something. Anticipation, maybe. "That actually sounds wise," she said softly. "What would that entail?" "Just a bit of paperwork," I told her. "James already prepared everything. He's an old friend, and he helped out as a favor. We can go through it together this weekend if you're feeling up to it." At the mention of James, her expression twitched. "James Merrick, the guy from college?" she asked, her tone tinged with suspicion. "Wasn't he a divorce lawyer?" I laughed it off like it was nothing. "He's in family law broadly. This is all standard stuff, just covering our bases now that we're going to be parents." That Saturday, James arrived with a thick folder of documents under his arm. He greeted Lisa warmly, offering well wishes about the pregnancy with effortless charm. "Mark's really gone above and beyond to make sure you and the baby are secure," he said as he laid out the papers on the dining table. "We've put together a full-spectrum family plan," James explained, motioning to the stack. "It touches on healthcare proxies, education planning, financial protections, everything you'd want covered." He spent over an hour walking us through page after page, striking a balance between clarity and just enough legalese to lull Lisa into complacency. She nodded occasionally, her attention waning as the language grew more technical. The most important documents, the ones that would tighten the snare, were dressed up to look like routine financial safeguards. In reality, those contracts moved all my significant assets into airtight, irrevocable trusts, with clauses Lisa could never fulfill if she was faking the pregnancy. They required medical certification of a viable fetus before any funds could be dispersed. And if the deception were discovered? The clauses didn't just disqualify her, they ensured she'd owe, not receive. "It's a lot, I know," James said with a kind smile as he placed the final sheet before her. "But this is standard for couples in your situation." Lisa hesitated, her pen hovering mid-air. "Should I have someone look over these, just to be safe?" she asked. James nodded calmly, still smiling. "Absolutely, if that makes you more comfortable. Just be aware," he added smoothly, "that even minor edits mean restarting the process, and that can take several weeks. Mark mentioned you wanted everything squared away before the second trimester." She looked at me, then at the stack. I could see the thoughts racing in her eyes, delay and possibly get caught, or sign now and lock in what she thought would be a windfall. Her greed won. She signed with barely a glance at the pages. After James departed, she embraced me tightly, resting her head on my chest. "That was a lot, but I'm glad we did it. It feels good knowing it's all handled." I held her, forcing down the bile in my throat. "I'd do anything to protect my family," I murmured. The words hung in the air like smoke. 2 weeks later, I set the final piece into motion. "I booked us an appointment," I said casually over breakfast. "It's with Dr. Abernathy, this Thursday." She glanced up from her phone, brows knitting together. "Who's that?" "Dr. Abernathy, Supposedly the best OB/GYN in Boston. One of my coworkers swears by him. His wife saw him through all 3 of her pregnancies. I smiled reassuringly. I thought it'd be smart to get a second opinion, just to be sure everything's going smoothly. And honestly, I haven't heard the heartbeat yet. I'd really love to. The color drained from Lisa's face. But I already have a doctor, she said quickly. Dr. Collins, she's been great. This isn't about replacing her, I said, keeping my tone light. It's just a one-time visit. Abernathy uses top-of-the-line 3D imaging. He can show us a crystal-clear view of the baby. Wouldn't those images look perfect in the baby book? Lisa paused mid-bite, her fork lowering to the plate as her appetite visibly faded. I don't think my health insurance will cover another physician, she muttered. Don't worry about the money, I said gently. I'll handle the cost. It matters to me. I reached across the table, aiming to take her hand. Please, Lisa. It would really mean a lot for me to be involved. She pulled her hand back before I could touch it, her expression sharp with irritation. I'm not feeling great right now. Morning sickness, she said, voice clipped. Let's not do this right now, okay? Of course, I answered smoothly, careful to conceal the small flicker of satisfaction her discomfort gave me. Take whatever time you need. She glanced away. The appointment's not until Thursday, but honestly, it's nearly impossible to get in with Dr. Abernathy. This slot only came up because someone else canceled. If we move it, we might be waiting weeks. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. Moments later, the bathroom door slammed shut. She wasn't sick. I knew that much. She was spiraling, looking for a way out of the appointment that would expose her fabricated story. Over the next 3 days, she tried everything to avoid it. She claimed she was too unwell to travel, warned that frequent doctor visits might endanger the pregnancy, and even tried to book a sudden work trip that happened to land on the same day. Each time, I calmly redirected the conversation, always circling back to her health and the baby's well-being. By Wednesday night, the excuses had dried up. As we were getting ready for bed, she sat on the edge of the mattress, her voice barely louder than a breath. There's something I have to say. I should have told you weeks ago. I remained silent, waiting, unreadable. Is everything all right? I asked after a moment. Is something wrong with the baby? She inhaled shakily. There is no baby, Mark. Even though I'd suspected it for weeks, hearing it spoken aloud was like stepping into a freezing storm. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I made it all up, she whispered, tears forming. You were so happy, and we were finally getting along again. I didn't want to destroy that. Her performance was convincing, almost. If I hadn't heard her laughing about it over the phone with her lover, I might have believed her. Why? I asked, my tone cold. She perched beside me, careful not to make contact. Things between us were falling apart. I knew you were ready to walk away. I panicked. I thought if we had a child, we'd have a reason to fix things, to remember why we started this. So you invented it all. The pregnancy, the ultrasound photos, everything, just to manipulate me into staying in a marriage that was already dead. Her tears came faster, streaking her cheeks. I'm sorry, Mark. I never planned to let it go on this long. I thought I'd pretend to miscarry after a while once we reconnected. It was stupid, and selfish, and wrong. Can you forgive me? I rose to my feet, stepping away as she reached out to me. You're right, it was wrong. But not just wrong. It was cold and calculated. I know, she whispered through her sobs, but I did it because I love you. I didn't want to lose you. No, Lisa, you did it because you didn't want to lose the lifestyle I provide. I crossed to the dresser, retrieving the folder I'd tucked away earlier that day. You did it because you thought you could secure your future with deception. I opened the folder and laid the contents across the bed. Transcripts of her calls with her lover, Screenshots of texts where they mocked me and laughed about the scam. Photos of her entering a hotel during times she claimed to be at prenatal visits. Her eyes darted across the evidence, color draining from her face. How did you get all this? I've known for weeks, I replied steadily. Since I came home early and overheard you on the phone, bragging about how easily I'd bought into it. Your exact words? 9 months of lies for a lifetime of support. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. You didn't realize that while you were building your little performance, I was collecting proof. Every message, every rendezvous, every deceit, documented, time-stamped, verified. And those forms you so happily signed, they weren't just about preparing for a baby that never existed. They were also legal safeguards, for me. I handed her the final document from the folder. A divorce petition, I said, filed this morning, on grounds of fraud and infidelity. And this, I added, tapping another set of papers, details the financial consequences outlined in the Family Protection Clause you agreed to. You should read it very carefully. She leafed through the pages, her face losing color with every word. This isn't real. This can't be legal. You tricked me. No, Lisa, I said coolly. You were so focused on your scam, you didn't even bother to read what you were signing. Every clause is legally binding. James made sure of that. You can't prove I wasn't pregnant, she said, her voice cracking under the strain. It's just your word against mine. Actually, I can prove it, I replied, tapping the folder that sat between us on the table. Your own words lay it all out. And just now, you confirmed everything. I motioned toward her phone. And that admission? You made it while fully aware the call was being recorded. Her eyes darted to the banner at the top of her screen. Recording in progress. She'd missed it, too rattled to notice. Her face crumpled as the realization took hold. The truth had surfaced, and there was no hiding from it now. Her marriage was over, and the lie she'd hoped would secure her future had detonated in her face. The very deception she clung to had become her undoing. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, voice thin and hollow. That's not for me to figure out, I said, calmly gathering the papers and slipping them back into the folder. You've got 48 hours to pack your things and move out. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned. I walked toward the door, then paused, glancing back. You thought you'd caught me in a trap I'd never escape, but all you did was corner yourself. The divorce was finalized faster than anyone expected. Faced with clear, irrefutable proof of her deceit, Lisa didn't even try to contest it. The judge upheld every clause of the prenup she once signed without hesitation. Her affair, with a man named David from her office, collapsed the moment he realized there'd be no financial windfall, no shared fantasy. Last I heard, she'd moved to Chicago, staying with her sister. Her reputation and bank account, both in tatters. 6 months have passed since the papers were signed. The rage that once kept me up at night has faded, replaced by a dull emptiness that's hard to shake. I sold the house, couldn't stand the memories clinging to its walls. My new place downtown is minimalist, almost sterile, but it's peaceful, quiet, a clean slate. James checks in often, usually dinner once a month, always with the same concern in his eyes. You've got to start living again, he tells me. Don't let this be the thing that defines you. Maybe he's right, but learning to trust again feels like rebuilding on scorched earth. Right now, I'm focused on work, on reconstructing myself, not as someone's husband, but as a man who survived betrayal and came out stronger. Sometimes, in the silence, I think of the child we never had, the baby she pretended was real. I imagine a life filled with laughter and innocence, not lies and manipulation. It's a ghost that lingers, not of a person, but of what could have been. Then I remind myself of what I've gained: freedom from a toxic relationship, clarity that came at a steep price, and above all, the strength to pick up the broken pieces and stand tall again. Lisa thought she'd closed the book on us. What she didn't count on was that I'd take the story back into my own hands. Every now and then, I get a message from an unfamiliar number. Apologies. Pleased to talk. Claims that she still loves me. I never respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some endings are final for a reason. And now I stand on my balcony, drink in hand, watching the city shimmer beneath me. I raise my glass to the pain, the scars, and the hard-won wisdom. The woman I once thought I loved, she was never real. The baby she used to manipulate me, a fabrication. But the man who rose from the wreckage, he's here. And for the first time in a long time, he's not looking back, only forward. And the road ahead has never looked brighter. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.